Butch, what frustrated you most about England's performance? Take your pick. You've got the top seven, Crawley and Root aside, scoring 50 for 5 between them in the first innings. You've got Carson Stokes going at 8.5s for a good portion of the start of the Australia second innings. You've got 5 drops in the field, letting Stark quite easily move on to 77, losing 38 for 5 on the third night. Where do you want to start?
Yes, you've taken my breath away a little bit with the breadth of choices you've given me. I think really the most annoying thing, and there's been one or two that have got under my skin over the last, well, say going back to the summer with the India series. I was incredibly frustrated and disappointed with England's inability to draw that Test match against India at Edgbaston, for example, or not winning the final game at the Oval, having got the opposition absolutely on their knees with an opportunity to win the series. And then, you look at the sort of overall philosophy, the overarching philosophy for the last 2 or so years has been to build a team capable of winning a Test series down in Australia. And the sort of the overarching philosophy of that has been around sort of self-expression, aggression, vibes, etc., etc. And they have been beaten here on a very, very good pitch at Brisbane. I've often said that I think Brisbane is sort of like the best cricket pitch in Australia in terms of its fairness, its balance between bat and ball, and the way that it develops throughout the course of the Test match. They've been beaten by a team with a standing captain, standing bowling attack, standing opening batter, and they've been beaten by old school determination, technique. Where else have we got? Hard work and discipline, right? So the sort of self-expression, the aggression, the vibes, all the rest of it, the talent, which is undoubted in the England side, has been beaten by just basic Test match cricket. Bowlers holding a line and length, batters playing for their off stump and digging in when conditions were tough and having fun when it wasn't so much. Taking catches, no more, no less. And so with everything that has gone on around, and it, baseball is a media construct, not something that belongs to the team or comes from the team. But with everything that this regime has sort of talked about, with the end goal of being successful in Australia because of all the virtues that they've decided to stick to stubbornly, come hell or high water, that hasn't been anywhere near good enough when you stack it up against the basics of good technique when you're batting, good technique when you're bowling, which allows you to hold a line of length for a long, long period of time, and the discipline required to do those things over the course of a Test match to wear an opposition down and win a Test match. And so that's where I am, really. It's full circle. The most annoying thing about it is that I kind of agree and have agreed for a long time that these are, generally speaking, the best cricketers knocking around. You can make one or two tweaks here and there in terms of the personnel out of the squad, but they've basically they've been out basicked by a very, very sort of workmanlike Australian 11. And if you're going to get beat on a fair pitch against a team like that, then God help us when they get their first 11 back.
Do you think there's an element of confusion in the minds of most of the England batters, Root and Stokes aside? The England players talk about having complete clarity a lot. We had Matt Roller on yesterday, and he referenced an answer Ollie Pope gave before the first day, where he said that it was important that players played with complete clarity without giving any clarity around what that clarity is about, if that makes sense. Do you think that they look confused? Because at the same time, you have, on day 4, Stokes and Jacks really digging in, but that was absolutely not how they went about things on day 1 and on day 3. There were periods on day 3 where they actually played Stark quite well, and the change bowlers come on, and they're playing a shot of ball at the change bowlers, and it's Nisa who gets Pope out first ball, having very nearly fallen to dog it in the previous over. I'm using Pope as an example, but there are plenty of others. Brooks cover drive against Stark, the first ball he placed in that spell on day one. Take your pick.
Let's go back to day one, right? That I think was probably a lot of the talk has obviously been about Root. Will he score 100? And my answer to that the whole time has been he probably will. I said, but actually that isn't the most important thing. The most important thing is that in the top six or seven of England's batters, they put pass scores on the board. And I reckon that batting performance on day one was probably the most disappointing of the lot. You know, Perth, it can happen. Teams get blown away there all the time. Australia get blown away there all the time. It's a very, very tough place to bat. But Brisbane, day one, you've won the toss. You've got one bowler to worry about, and that is Mitchell Starc, as was the case perhaps at Perth. And every time the guy got the ball in the hand, he literally didn't swing a ball back into the right hander the entire innings to get his six for. He bowled wide and a full length, and we just kept diving at it like lemmings jumping off the cliff, and donated him a six for. Joe Root plays serenely at the other end, gets 130, but we still only make 330. And that was because of a last innings partnership with Jofra Archer. So you're already, I reckon we were 100 to 120 short first innings. And not due to the brilliance of Australia's bowling at all, due to complete and utter lack of discipline and lack of, if they want to use the word clarity, then a lack of clarity as to where the dangers were and how you were going to go about putting a match-winning total on the board, having been given the opportunity to do so, batting first. So the thing around Mitch Starc is, yes, of course, he's the most successful bowler in pink ball cricket and stuff. But I've seen him bowl spells where he's had it on a string and he's swinging it back into the left-handers, then going across. Did he do any of that really in that innings? No, not at all. In fact, he looked a little bit less dangerous, a lot less dangerous than he had done at Perth, a little bit sort of down in speed and all the rest of it, and was just quite happy to push the ball up there across away from the right-handers. And every single time he got the ball in his hand, they went at him as though the conversation had never happened around what the dangers might be of trying to drive through the extra cover on the up against him. Just to seeing him off, because the other guys are less likely to knock you over. We'll get to what happened in the second innings in a bit. But, you know, the danger, he was the clear and present danger, as he had been in the first test match. Australia had even left out Nathan Lyon. They kind of, you know, they left themselves even shorter than they were in that first test. And still, even with 100 from Joe Root, there's still 100, 120 less than they ought to have made in that first innings, and then bowled an absolute shower of poo on day two to compound the error with the bat. So it was, I mean, the first two and a half days were a shambles, an absolute shambles. You add to that the drop catches, and you end up where you end up.
Before we get to the bowling, back in your playing career, what did coaches actually do? Your former teammate Marcus Trescothick is the batting coach, and he was asked yesterday if there had been any discussion around England players driving on the up off a length, how several of them got out in the first test, and he said no, there hadn't been. So I don't think it's unfair to wonder, and I know that a lot of fans are wondering, what conversations are the England coaching staff having at all with their batters, and not just the top order batters. Carson Atkinson in the first innings, England weren't completely out of it when they come in, and they both fall very cheaply, playing aggressive shots, driving
and Jacks as well. Yeah. I mean, Will had come in at number 8 and was looking fine back along there with Stokes. And then I think, what was it? He had Starks comes back on for another spell. He bowls one very, very wide one across Jacks, who has a massive flap at, trying to hit through extra cover. Now, as a left-hander, you know, growing up with bowlers bowling over the wicket across you, so it's similar sort of angle to the left arm over to the right-handers. When the ball gets that wide, if you're not leaving it alone, you want to be trying to hit it at square or behind square. Allow the ball to go past you and hit it with a sort of a flatter bat, either a front or back foot. It doesn't matter. You don't have to do both, but you're not trying to hit it sort of against the angle, straightish towards extra cover or mid off. You're trying to hit it point or behind point, allowing the ball to get past you and using the angle that the bowler's already given you. So, you know, in terms of in terms of sort of like a technical idea, that if you have decided that you're going to have a go at Mitchell Stark when he bowls it very, very wide, you're trying to hit it in the wrong place to start with. But then, given that Stark is the danger, and given that the danger is that he's trying to get you to nick the ball to slip, why are you allowing him to do that? When England were patient enough to wait for him to bowl straight, they picked him off. As I said, I thought that the batting day one was horrendous. And lo and behold, Joe Root gets his century in Australia, but it turns out to be worthless, and he will imagine that it is, as though, even though the monkey's off his back, but because it hasn't resulted in a victory for England, it means a hell of a lot less.
I was just say, if England put in a performance like that in your day under Duncan Fletcher, what would have happened in the dressing room? Because I think it is a fair question to ask. What is going on behind closed doors? I think people's frustration around this England side at the moment is that there are these immensely talented players who are not necessarily learning from their previous mistakes, and it's cost them big time in this test in particular. Are those conversations being had? Another thought I had during this game was, what do the players think when they watch Joe Root bat? Because Joe Root is just doing his thing. You almost didn't notice him for large swathes of the first day. Just accumulates 130 runs, really, without ever going into second or third gear. And I just don't know what the conversations are.
Well, I mean, you would hope, wouldn't you, that as a batting group, that they would get around and speak among themselves. The coaches are there, yes, to throw in ideas. They're not there to tell you what to do. But as a batter, you often hear about, when Anderson and Broad were looming large on the international stage, about being the leaders of the bowling group, and they'd get the bowlers around and they would talk about what was going to be successful on this sort of pitch, and what their plans were, and how they were going to build partnerships and build pressure and stuff as a bowling group. And as a batting group, you do exactly the same thing. Where are our dangers? What are the things that we need to be sort of wary of? And so, yes, the coaches are there to throw in ideas, and I'm very surprised that there hasn't been a conversation about driving the up in Australia, because it's kind of like it's 101 really. No three-quarter batted shots off front or back foot, and avoid driving on the up unless you're on about 80 and the ball's got soft. Those aren't sort of wildly. Those aren't new ideas by any means. They're just kind of stuff that is absolutely written into the idea of being a successful batting group in Australia. I mean, I don't even know whether that's interesting. It's just that the fact of the matter is they haven't done it, and they haven't seemed to have learned anything from Perth. They've gone to Brisbane, where, as I've said, the pitch I think was a lot more batter friendly than the Perth pitch was, and our best batter ever has gone out there and made 130, and still weren't able to compile enough runs in the first innings to make it really, really count in terms of winning the game. And England, there's a minuscule chance that you can win 3 on the bounce in Australia. I think it's happened once before, a team going 2-0 down.
Yeah, Bradman 36-37, where he scored
right.
270,
and it was Australia that did it. Yeah. But the other point is that if you're not going to beat a team that does not have Lyon, does not have Cummins, does not have Hazelwood, does not have a regular opening pair, and all the rest of it, then what the hell chance have you got when they start to put their strongest team back on the park? The opportunity afforded England in both these Test matches, but particularly this one, with the conditions not being as extreme as they are often in Perth, is extraordinary. And the fact that nothing seemed to have been learned from one Test match to the next, in terms of the batting group, and then the bowlers bowling poorly in terms of being able to hold a line of length. This is where sort of the likes of Nisa and Boland come into the conversation, who are not doing anything wildly special, nothing that you wouldn't see in the county championship, Division 1 on any given day, by holding a line and length on off stump, keeper up at times. I mean, there is the great irony, but we've spent all these years looking completely ignoring anybody that wasn't bowling 85 miles an hour plus, and we get completely undone by Michael Neser with the keeper up. I mean, you wouldn't read about it, would you?
Yeah, on the bowling, I think fairly praised them for how well they bowled in the first innings, and they were irresistible, all five of them that day. But they were really poor, and you're right to compare their performance of the ball compared to the Aussies. Not just that opening burst where Carson Stokes were extremely expensive, Weatherall off to a flyer, Labuschagne off to a flyer as well, but also when the ball got softer, England went to the short ball ploy, which they so often do on the Stokes, and they were very expensive again. Yes, Cast takes 2 wickets in an over, but at that point, Australia miles in front of the game already.
Yeah, what were they? 290 for 3 or something?
Yeah,
Weren't they, at the time?
291 for 3, I think. And then if you compare it to similar periods when England were batting, it was Boland and Neser bowling the same ball every time. Neser bowling would carry up to the stumps, and England found it difficult to score freely. There was a quite intense passage of play on day one when Stokes and Root were batting together, and they dug in really hard, actually. Australia bowled well. Neser bowled 4 overs for 5 runs, and they withstood it. The partnership comes to an end because that run out, amazing run out actually by Josh Inglis, 1 stump to aim at.
Yeah.
But there was a really big difference between the quality of the 2 bowling attacks in this game, and it's Australia's second string bowling attack.
Yeah, but I go back to my opening rant, really, that with all of the emphasis having been on people being able to do wildly incredible things and talent over pretty much everything else, it was just old fashioned virtues of being able to hold a line of length and have the discipline to do that time after time after time after time that won the day. Um, you know, the technique has almost become a sort of dirty word in English cricket over the last 10 years or so. Um, because people assume, or at least players seem to assume, that means sort of like a lack of ambition or a lack of intent, which is the word that seems to have replaced it. But the fact of the matter is that you need basically good technique in order to be successful at having all of the intent and the aggression in the world. And if you don't have some semblance of that sort of technique, you can't do disciplined things when they're required. Straight legged driving on the up, hands miles out in front of the body. Or a lot of these things don't get shown up as being dangerous on sort of relatively good, relatively slow English pitches, but they're dangerous as hell in Australia. I mean, that's kind of the point. The cricket in Australia is very, very hard, very, very tough. And part of that is because the surfaces force you to be able to repeat a discipline over and over and over and over to be successful. And we singularly failed to be able to do that.
What changes do you think should be made for Adelaide?
Well, honestly, I don't know. I mean, the bowling attack is going to need a little refresh. But Adelaide tends to. I haven't seen a Test match in Adelaide that hasn't been a pink ball one for a while. So going back to sort of daytime games where it tends to be very, very flat, you need to sort of set straight fields and again be very disciplined. Hope that the ball reverses and spin comes into it. So Bashir perhaps stands a chance of being selected back into the side, unless they feel that that Jacks with the extra batting that he provides is going to be good enough or as good as Bashir as the off spinner. We didn't see any great evidence of that, albeit he only got through 11 overs, but he did rag a couple and looked a lot more comfortable in the second spell that he had after the 1 over he had before tea on whatever day it was, day 2. So that's a possibility. Cast might be asked to sit one out, which and then there'll be slight concern over bringing in somebody like Tongue, who can be very expensive as well. Although actually, I feel like if the pitch is very flat in Adelaide, that he comes into it a lot. With the way that he can bowl very full and very quick and that sort of thing. But I'm struggling to think about Adelaide at the moment. It's just this one is stinging quite a lot, because I think it was an incredible opportunity for England to level up the series and regain a little bit of the sort of like the feel good factor, around the series. But I think that they're going to we've got a long break, haven't we? Was it the 17th that it starts? If the stick was bad after Perth, it's going to be twice as bad after this one. And there is no place to hide because really they've only got themselves to blame. There aren't any excuses around this one. Drop catches, badly disciplined sort of giveaway batting in the first innings, awfully badly disciplined bowling in the first innings that allowed Australia to hunt down their hard won first innings score in the first place and sort of get ahead in the game. And then just crumbling in a heap to nothing more than good, well disciplined county style bowling in the second innings, and that's it. All of the hope and expectation around what could and what couldn't happen is almost done in what we're talking, five and a bit days.
We got a good message in from a listener, Ed, who I think sums up how a lot of England fans are feeling at the moment. It's so disappointing that this England team, who've been great at reversing miserable narratives and challenging convention, have so comprehensively reverted to England in Australia patterns, which I think is fair.
Part of the reason it feels so bad is because there is and was a genuine belief that things might be different this time. Because as you rightly said, there are enough players, batsmen and bowlers, with an enormous amount of talent. So much. I mean, it's not even funny, but it kind of proves to you that sort of talent and vibes are no substitute for hard work and discipline at times. And this Test match was as big a show of that than any that we've seen in the last 12 months.
I think the final point I'd make is that, like in this test in particular, we've seen just how inexperienced a lot of these players are in this sort of Test cricket. I know a few of them have been playing for 3 or 4 years now, but a lot of them have only really played 1 or 2 marquee series. And certainly a lot of them, this is their first tour of Australia. And I think you can sort of see that they're not used to intensity like this. A lot of Test cricket isn't as anywhere near as challenging as what they're currently facing. If you look at this iteration of side since Anderson was retired at the start of 2024, who've they played? They played Sri Lanka and West Indies at home. Went to Pakistan away, who are towards the bottom of the Test rankings and lost. I know conditions were not what they expected, but they still lost.
Yeah.
Went to New Zealand and won. That's a very good result. Brooke was amazing that tour. Bethel was very good that tour. The bowling was good that tour. But other than that, it's the India series at home, and India are a side that are falling down the rankings, and it was 2-2. So
yeah. Not being of all the things that worried me in the lead up to this series was not beating India at home. That's kind of like that's an issue, because you'd expect, you go to India and you kind of expect to probably come home with nothing on tour there. Although South Africa and New Zealand of late have proven that is not an impossible task. But not to beat India and indeed Australia sort of 2 years before that. No. How much easier would this assignment have been had they gone down there holding the Ashes rather than having to win them back outright? And not winning that series also was a disaster, particularly given the fact that they should have won the first 2 Test matches of the series. So, the portents were there that perhaps when the pressure cooker gets very, very hot, that the team doesn't quite have the steel and the mental capability to stand up to it, and that will be the accusation leveled at them right now. I mean, Harry Brooke is obviously the man who nearly always comes under the spotlight, and why is this light keep going off? It looked as though in the second innings that someone had pinned him up against the wall and said, "Listen, mate, you are pissing away your talent here, and you're letting the rest of us down with the way that you're playing. This game is not a carnival for you just to go out and have as much fun as possible. There is some responsibility that comes with the ability that you have." And he got a good one, which I suppose kind of is that there is the lesson. If you're going to get good balls in Test cricket, there are good bowlers out there, and therefore sort of just throwing away innings willy-nilly because you're having a good time will come back and bite you eventually. So, it's just, I hope that they are suitably chastened and we don't get any nonsense in the post match sort of interviews and stuff. Because as I said, they've not been battered by a brilliant Australian side and irresistible performances. They were workmanlike with the bat. They lots of 50s and 60s. No man made 100. But they got par and above to get themselves in front. They caught everything and they bowled with incredible discipline. With a bowling attack that was a shadow of what we thought we might be facing from the best guys that they've got. So they ticked all of the boxes when it came to just doing the basics really, really well. And we did the basics incredibly badly.
Lots to ponder for England over the next 10 days before Adelaide. Cheers for your time, Butch. See you next week.